Hello, this is going to be a video about ESA and PIP, that's Employment Support Allowance and Personal Independence Payment. These are benefits in the UK for people who are disabled, either physically or mentally, intended to help them in their life. I'm doing this because I spent a lot of yesterday advising someone who was going through the process and was rather intimidated and scared and looking for advice. And I thought it was worth doing a whole video on it so that I have something that I can refer people to and reference people to, because I've now been through the whole process, apart from I'm still waiting on the judgment from the tribunal. So I can help, I think, in perhaps a more approachable way than a big stack of forms or whatever. If you're not applying, this may not be of that much interest to you, but I think it could still be. Because if you listen to what I'm going to tell you, you'll come to understand that it would take a great deal of effort and time in order to scrounge or otherwise fake out these benefits. And it might change your attitude towards people who need financial assistance of this kind, so that maybe you won't regard them as malingerers or whatever else. So, advice on how to apply for these, and the process is very similar. Let's get started. There's some general things that will really help you going through all this. Some of them are difficult, some of them are hard. Some of them can aggravate your conditions, particularly if you suffer from depression or anxiety. Now, the forms are big, complicated, and if you have a mental health disorder or an invisible illness, they're not particularly well tailored to your illness. So when you fill out the forms, approach it trying to get as much information down as possible. So if you even have a slight problem that fits one of the criteria, say yes and then fill out the details in the section there. If you need help, there is a charity called Together who often operate in partnership with Mind. So if you can get a GP referral to your local Mind Wellbeing Centre, usually they will have appointments with Together there, or you may be able to contact Together independently by email, via their website or whatever, and be able to get some help there. They can even have someone sit and walk you through the form if you don't have anyone else to do that for you, and they know how the forms work and everything, and they should be able to help you with that. One thing that's really difficult is that through this entire process you're not allowed any pride or dignity whatsoever. So you can't hold back. You have to present your case, not lying, but in the worst case possible. So present it as when you're at your worst. Don't hold anything back. Don't allow yourself to be prideful. I made this mistake, I think. And just make sure you're absolutely explicit and open about everything that's wrong with you and the extent to which it is wrong with you. Any holding back, any retaining any pride or dignity at all will unfortunately count against you when you fill out these forms. When it comes to the assessments, this probably counts double. Now, my issues are depression and anxiety, but if I have plenty of forewarning and can psych myself up before something, I can generally manage it okay, but then I get a kind of social hangover afterwards that knocks me out for a day or two. So when I went to my assessments, I seemed confident and so on. I wasn't dressed that differently to how I am now, and they decided that meant I was well kempt somehow, and looked okay, so that will count against you. I'd had a bath the previous night because I find them relaxing, and I was trying to get myself ready to deal with all this stress. So they considered me to be well groomed and so on. So don't wear fresh clothes, don't wash, don't bathe, don't shave. they will count that against you. It may not make a huge difference, but it will make something of a difference. So that's something to consider. Okay, let's get into some specifics. When it comes to assessments, keep in mind what I already said about not wearing clean clothes, not wearing fresh clothes, not bathing, not shaving, all those things. Because they really do assess you just the way you present yourself and the way you walk in, not necessarily how you feel the rest of the time. So you need to present yourself as though you're at your lowest ebb or your worst as well. They will even watch how you walk from the waiting room into the assessment chamber, and they will assess you on how you interact with them there. So if you're having a good day, you can give them a presentation of yourself that isn't accurate to your degree of illness and problems, and obviously they're less likely to grant you the payment in that instance. So you have to keep that in mind. If you're nervous and anxious and upset, allow yourself to show it. If you're anything like me and you have mental illnesses, you're probably rather adept at hiding them a lot of the time, pushing them down and then letting them express themselves later. You can't do that here. You have to let them see how nervous you are. And of course they may not note it down even if you are. My leg was going like restless leg syndrome throughout the entirety of one of my assessments, and yeah, he said I was sitting there and calm and seemed okay. It wasn't the case. Before you go into your assessments, it's a good idea for you to look up the PIP and ESA points systems. If you just Google that, you should be able to find something. And that will tell you how bad you have to be in order to score points in each of the categories they're going to be talking to you about. And it will also tell you how many you need in order to qualify for a particular kind of benefit. It can also explain, to one degree or another, what they consider to be disability at each of those levels. So, for example, I stress out massively about cooking the evening meal. This causes me a huge amount of anxiety. When I'm particularly low, I can't do it, so it's a ready meal or something really simple, or just wang something in the microwave, which doesn't really qualify as preparing a meal. When I'm alone and I'm very down, I often forget to eat. But in neither of these instances was I scored as if I had a particular problem, because just being able to wang something in the microwave is considered capable to an extent, and the fact that I can cook sometimes was held against me. So you have to be really careful about how you answer these questions. Another thing to keep in mind is they're looking for you to be unwell at least 50% of the time, otherwise you just get written off. Now, I described myself as being really bad, maybe 6 months of the year, somewhat bad 3 months of the year, and okay 3 months of the year. But they took that to mean I was perfectly fine and dandy half the time, and it needs to be over half the time before they'll consider you sick. They misunderstood. My experience with my assessors was not particularly good. What they wrote down and recorded did not fit what I recalled of the assessments. Now, previously they have had an 80% target rejection rate, which supposedly has been retracted. So, there's an impetus upon them to reject you. So make sure you check what they've written or ask for a copy immediately after the assessment. I forgot, even though I'd been told to do so, because I just wanted to get out of there. But that's really important. You can even record the interview if you want, and that's a good suggestion as well. If you've got a dictaphone or a recording app on your phone or something and a decent mic on it, record the whole session. This way you have stuff to back you up later on when you talk about if you have to appeal. So that's all really important. You can either travel to your assessment or you can be assessed at home if you're considered to be bad enough. If at all possible, it's probably best to get assessed at home, because that presents you in a more disabled light, I guess. I didn't. I went to the assessments. Maybe that was a mistake. Perhaps. You will have to wait longer if you want a home assessment, but it may be worth it in the long run. Take your medical backup information to your assessment and offer it to them. Don't wait to be asked. I had all my information with me, but they didn't ask for it, so I didn't present it to them. And yet one of the assessments, the ESA one, I think, claimed to have never had my doctor's note. I had sent them 2 copies because they lost the first one and had a copy with me, but they never asked for it. Take any other medical evidence that you can with you, and it may be a good idea to get all that together first, because you'll need copies of it at every stage. Make copies of everything, because they will lose stuff. So make sure you have at least 3 copies for each thing that you're applying for. 3 copies of your doctor's notes, 3 copies of anything else you put together, a note from your therapist, whatever else. Make sure you got multiple copies and access to more. You have to pay for a doctor's note, which is unfortunate and may be difficult for a lot of you, but it's still worth having one. But maybe ask for a more detailed doctor's note, not just confirming that you're ill and that this has a negative impact on your life. Ask for something more detailed. Maybe coach your doctor on the kinds of things that they're going to be asking on the forms or in the interviews to back you up in that way. My doctor made a mistake when I asked for a second letter and filled out a form that was sent to ATOS when I was at the tribunal stage. So you have to be really clear with people, and if possible get a face-to-face with your doctor to discuss all of this. I know this is all very intimidating, and something else you have to prepare yourself for is this is gonna take a long time. Between submitting the forms to your assessments is weeks, from your assessments to hearing whether you've got it or not is weeks again, and then you may not get it. There are 2 stages to the appeals for both processes, and they take a long time, and they're annoying and convoluted and again stressful. I applied about 6 months ago and I'm still waiting for the tribunal stage, so if you go into appeals, prepare yourself for the long haul. It's horrible, but stick it out. You'll want to give up. I wanted to give up, but just keep going. This system has to change. It is inhuman, it is impractical, and the more people that push, the more loaded the system will get, and the more pressure there will be upon the government and the various groups involved to change it somehow. So definitely always appeal, take it as far as you can. Now the first thing that happens if you're rejected and you want to appeal is that you have to put in for a copy of their assessments. So you have to ask for that. You're probably going to spend half an hour to an hour on the phone waiting to talk to someone in order to get that sent to you, and you get that sent to you. Now that gives you the notes from the assessment and the notes from the assessor. The person who assessed you and wrote stuff down isn't the person who decides whether you get the benefits or not. Someone else independent does based upon their notes. But you can examine both of those, and then I would strongly suggest writing a long letter expressing every way you disagree, how you think you should have been scored, any discrepancies in what you remember of what happened and what they wrote of what happened, and then put in for the reconsideration. Reconsideration isn't exactly an appeal. It goes back to ATOS or whichever company it is that's doing this, and they take the notes and anything extra you've supplied and they give it to a second assessor who will judge it and then come back. Now, quite a lot of people will pass on that reassessment, but also a lot of people won't. I think it's about 50-50 of people who put in for the first stage of appeal get their appeal approved, but that's still good odds that you won't. I didn't, despite disputing a lot of what they said and providing additional medical evidence. So the next stage after that is tribunal, and this takes the longest. You have to put in for it, you have to wait for contact from the tribunal service. You have to wait for an even more detailed report from your assessor, whether that's ATOS or whoever else. They will send you a fat stack of notes which goes into a lot more depth about all the assessment, why they've rejected you, whatever else. So at this point you then need to send all the information you have again to the tribunal service. Some of that you can probably cull from the paperwork that you've been sent by ATOS or whoever, your assessment company, and send all of that on to the tribunal service. I would also include the letter you put in with your first appeal, and I would write a second letter based on the information in this stack of paper, going over everything else that you disagree with, any problems that you've had, and explaining why. Now is also the time to throw in any other additional medical evidence that you've had. I went back to my doctor and asked for a more detailed letter. I contacted more people that I had been in touch with about my illnesses, and threw anything by the kitchen sink into it and sent it off to the tribunal. And now I'm waiting. And at the end of all this process, you'll be approved for payments probably for a period of about 2 years, unless you have a severe, debilitating, ongoing illness that is never going to get better, like you're a quadriplegic or something. Otherwise, you're going to have to go through this whole rigmarole again every couple of years or so. And what for? If you got the upper level of both of these benefits, you might get around £600 a month, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's a lot of work for really not that much, but it can make a huge difference, especially if you're able to do this and that on the side that can earn you a little bit of extra money. If you get rejected all the way, they do suggest that you go and apply for job seekers allowance, but a lot of people with illnesses who go to the job centre end up being told they're unfit for work and to reapply for everything else. So it swings and roundabouts. I don't want to put you off, I just want to be absolutely clear about how difficult, humiliating and soul destroying this whole process is to go through. But I really don't want to put you off. Go for it, push it, appeal every step of the way. This whole system is off-putting, it's dehumanizing, and it's humiliating, and it's designed that way to put people off applying, which leaves a lot more people destitute, in trouble, scraping to make ends meet. And we also have this culture in our society that anyone who is on any kind of benefit is a freeloader or a scrounger or malingering, faking it somehow, and this just manifestly isn't true. I don't know the stats on disability, but I know that when it comes to unemployment payments, that at least 1 year in recent history, more was spent chasing after supposed fraudsters than was actually lost to fraudsters. It's not that much of a problem. People don't tend to apply for these things unless they need them, and a handful of sociopaths who do, to steal from people. I think that's the cost of doing business and looking after the people who need it, unfortunately. But the public doesn't necessarily see it that way, and at least the Conservative governments certainly don't see it that way. There desperately needs to be reform, and one of the steps to doing that is applying if you qualify and pushing it through every stage to make it costly and difficult to reject people. It's on us to make that difference, and we are some of the people who are least fit and least able to do it due to our mental and physical issues. But it's down to us, and it's down to our families and our advocates and our friends and our supporters to understand that this is a problem and to push for change. And do make sure that you take your advocate or a family member to your assessment if you go, and make sure you take them in with you to the assessment. They don't tell you that you can do that, but you can. You can have them with you. You can hold their hand. They can help you get through things that you stumble on, and perhaps most importantly, there'll be a second witness if you get into a dispute. I think that's about all I can offer at the moment. I might do a follow-up video if people have questions. Just leave them below in the comment section, and I'll try and help as best I can. And here's good luck to all of us going through the appeals system. Zang.
Everyone's so ordinary. They watch the world with blind eyes. Can't you hear them talking funny?